Welcome to 27 Topics. My name is Paul Knies, and I am the host of the show. And today we have a very special guest, Dr. Norma Kreilein. She's in pediatrics and takes care of humans from birth to 23 or about college graduation. Welcome to 27 Topics. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And today we're going to be talking about childhood obesity. And I think that probably can be a subject you can talk about for a long time, knowing the nature of your practice.
It's a complicated topic, and I think there's a lot to study about it. Yes.
Why is there such a it just seems like, of course, obesity is and overweight is a national program, a state program, and there's we have all these programs or educational programs, I guess, reminding people about exercise and your health. But in childhood, why is there such an obese problem in children?
I think that is kind of the $64,000 question that everyone is wrestling with. I started pediatrics in 1989 and saw in the first 5 years of my practice what seemed to me to be an alarming number of children that were developing weight problems, and tried to figure out through reading the literature and listening, but also you have a huge study group as you live and work every day, and that sometimes gives you the cutting edge of what the problem is. And I noticed a few things 10 to 15 years ago already that I think have panned out to be part of the problem. But I think, to make a long story short, there are a number of factors, all of which can potentially operate to basically shake out as many overweight children as possible. Genetic influences, the diet that they eat, how much that they eat, how they're trained to think about food, their activity level. All of those things seem to me to be acting in varying degrees in every child to produce a lot of overweight children. So it's multifactorial. There are a lot of potential things that can cause a child to be overweight. And I think, unfortunately, in the media and sometimes in medicine, we sometimes look for, it's sometimes, I think, thought of as a quick fix or a one-size-fits-all solution, no pun intended. But in obesity, you're not going to find that. I think if you take 10 overweight children, you're going to find 10 different reasons, 10 different profiles of why those kids got to where they are. And medicine tends to sometimes research to find one thing that causes it, one thing that causes it in everyone, and that's going to paralyze us, I think, at solving this problem. Is that I think ultimately it boils down to looking at an individual child and trying to figure out what is the problem in this particular child, because I think society as a whole has put kids in a situation where we are simply developing as many overweight children as we can, and we need to turn that process backwards. That has caught the attention, the incidence of obesity has caught the attention of the government, and I think rightfully so. A lot of resources are being put into education and action to try to fix this problem. I can tell you some of the things I wonder if they really will help or not. But I do think that it obviously is going to start by trying to identify the child that is having a problem and to fix it as well and as early as possible. Because if you totally ignore it and continue the current way that a child is eating, they're only going to become more overweight.
And it just continues.
Yes.
What can parents do to try to prevent? I guess it starts at birth. Well, even before birth, probably. Mm-hmm. I mean, some of it's inherited.
Yes. There are certainly genetic tendencies. Those you can't change. There is the fourth, there are several things that I think are basic. Breastfeeding tends to decrease the incidence of obesity. Of course, not everyone can breastfeed, but that is one thing you can do. Encourage physical activity, watch diet. That's a whole question in and of itself. You know, what is good, what is not.
Yes.
So many foods are labeled in a very confusing way to where it almost takes a PhD to analyze whether or not that food is going to help your child or not help your child. I think that trying to recognize what is normal growth and what is not normal growth, that's something that I've noticed a long time ago, is that especially in the 18-month to 3-year age range, the average parent or family member does not have a very accurate perspective on what a child is supposed to look like, how thin or how fat they are supposed to be. And so often I think parents are put between a rock and a hard place where they find later on that their child is overweight, and that obviously came from somewhere, but we don't give them good, solid advice on when that problem started and what to do about it. So I think you have to start by defining what is an overweight child at every particular age, so that you can then identify the child as soon as possible who's becoming overweight, because I do think that the sooner and the earlier you identify the child at risk, it's a lot easier to fix a 4-year-old that is 5 pounds overweight than it is to fix a 12-year-old that is 75 pounds overweight.
Are schools doing types of education on obesity, or is that not something they necessarily are concerned about?
I think schools are very concerned. I think there were some mandates passed in the past year or two that have directed schools to change what's in vending machines, change what is fed to children for lunch, look at how much time they get outside, because I think that has been a factor as well in the past 10 years in a child's ability to maintain their weight over time. So those are very good programs that I think will benefit children.
The food that the kids eat, and whether or not they're grazers or 3 meals a day, does that have a bearing?
Yes, I think it does. I think one of the things I've seen the most often is that children do not always come to learn to like the types of foods that they need to eat. And that then, if they're genetically predisposed, will make them more likely to become overweight. So if you have a child that comes from a family who is genetically predisposed and all they ever see is pasta or juices or macaroni and cheese, they're more likely to become overweight because they don't get enough fiber in, they don't get enough vegetables in. That's probably the most painful thing I've seen over time, is that that diet has a lot to do with it, that a lot of times we become too concerned with what a child likes and not enough with getting them over time to learn to like the types of foods that will keep them thin. It's always kind of challenged me at 3 to say, you know, with what we're feeding kids between birth and 3, how many children at 3 years of age would choose a bran muffin over Fruit Loops? And why is that? It's because of what they're trained to like. And so a lot of the tastes for things that are good for them are acquired tastes, and it's tough as a parent, but I do think a lot of children, if they're re-exposed to foods over time, can be bent a different direction.
You know, kids, I don't know if kids who really like fresh vegetables, like lettuce and stuff, those types of things, it's not so much a problem, I think, with cooked vegetables, but when they are fresh vegetables, You talk about lettuce and carrots and those types of things. How do you get them to maybe eat those types of things? I mean, and maybe I'm just thinking of something, but it just seems to me that whenever you're out and about, you see that the kids are not the ones to eat the fresh lettuce.
Right. I think those are foods that are much more difficult to get children to like, and it takes a lot of energy over time. And also, and that's where I try to point out to parents, the 2 to 3 year old child is not going to starve to death. They actually eat very little at that age because they're at a downturn on their BMI. They're growing tall and thinning out, so they really don't need to eat that much. But yet, we tend to worry about their small stomachs and their blood sugar probably a little more than what we should, and so they're constantly grazing on very sweet, non-fiber, easy-to-chew foods, and they're always full. They only have this much to eat in a day. They get it as cereal, so when they sit down at the meal where the vegetables are served or the salad is served, they're not hungry, they don't eat, and sometimes they're fed the kid foods instead. That's almost all that's available for kids in restaurants, but that doesn't mean that's what's good for them. So instead of saying, I am not a finish the plate person, but I think a better way to teach a child is to say, you should eat your broccoli first. You cannot have pasta until you eat your broccoli. You should eat your fruit. You cannot have a cookie until you've eaten your fruit. And sometimes I think to look at the size of the cookie and the size of the child and the percentage of that child's calories that have now been, it might only be one cookie, but it's a pretty big cookie. I think that sometimes breakfast has deteriorated to where kids get 50% of their calories at breakfast, and it's very high in sugar, low in fiber foods that doesn't do anything for their taste for vegetables. And I've learned to rethink breakfast as potentially an opportunity to feed fruits and vegetables instead of the cereals and other stuff, nuts sometimes, and other things they can get that are much better for breakfast than what they eat. I think they just get so much of the processed foods, and those processed foods are not labeled well for the average person to know that this isn't good for them. A lot of the processed cereals, you have to become a real label reader to say, okay, it's got 25% of vitamins and nutrients, but it's got absolutely no fiber and 12 grams of sugar per serving. It may have 25% of those nutrients, but those are artificially added, and I can tell you that food is going to be a problem in a child who's overweight or who has a predisposition. It's basically empty calories. We tend to kind of go into a fog on foods like chocolate milk, for example. We put chocolate in so they drink the milk. You wouldn't give them a candy bar to drink the milk, but we put chocolate and sugar in it for them to drink the milk. And we worry about how much milk they drink. They need to drink the milk plain. They should learn to eat the fruit without the sugar on it, the yogurt without the sugar on it. I think one of the major things I've tried to do over the past several years with my own children is to, because it's so hard to figure out, to look at sugar grams on the carton and say, how many grams of sugar is my kid getting in? Because that's the part of the pyramid that should be limited. And it's there. It's just not that easy to interpret, and to face the fact that a lot of the foods that you're going to be feeding children may not be their first preference, but that's okay. It's okay to put broccoli on their plate and wait for them to eat it. It's okay to put a grilled chicken breast on and wait for them to chew it. I think a lot of the foods. It's been my observation, I think, that children don't learn to chew very well. They get a lot of very processed, soft foods, and they don't learn to chew, and that limits their taste for things that they have to chew, because most of the really healthy things that you eat later on take a certain amount of chewing that we really don't teach children how to do.
If you or someone you know has a talent to showcase or an event to promote on 27 Topics, please contact this station.
I know when you go into the baby food section for a new child, you look at the baby foods and it's 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, up to a year. You can buy this soft baby food.
Yeah, any parent who's ever been in my office will tell you I'm very anti-baby foods, because I think it gets them hooked on a very soft, very bland diet that becomes the macaroni and cheese and the chicken nugget diet and French fry diet. And it looks good, the labels are good, but that's something that has really bothered me for a long time, is if the baby foods we were feeding children were really that good for them, then we should have 3-year-olds that want the bran muffin. Something is not right there, because they're not turning out the way they should. So the whole culture of what we feed children, I don't know that I can tell you that I have the answer, but I can definitely tell you there's something that's not right with it, no matter how well advertised it is.
Is there some kind of balance between eating and exercise with kids? I mean, today they're in front of the computers, in front of the video machines, and that's not really getting the type of exercise they probably need.
I think for some children it is. I also see children who get plenty of exercise becoming overweight. So that's where I think it is different between children. Some children become overweight because they don't exercise. Some become overweight because they're fed the wrong amounts and wrong types of foods, and some it's a combination of the two. So you see a little bit of everything when you look at how children become overweight. I think ultimately when they become overweight, it eventually affects how well they can exercise. There's no question about that. So and I also think that there are some foods, if you don't change the diet, you can have a child in 5 sports and they still won't thin out. That for many, many children, the diet is at the heart, and the diet when they're young is at the heart of why they become overweight. And there's how that exactly plays out, I don't know that I can tell you in every child, but it's just been very, very obvious over time that there are a lot of kids who run and run and run and run, and it's almost got to be in what they eat that does it.
To keep them doing, but that keeps them thin sometimes, but not always.
Yeah,
it's like you said.
Exactly.
It depends on the diet.
Yeah.
So there's not really a balance. There is a balance, but you really have to understand the balance.
You have to look at the individual child and their lifestyle and try to pick out what is the problem with that particular child. I don't think that you can look at all overweight children and ever think that we will find something that is true about all of them, other than they're gaining more than what they should. That's about the only thing that's common among overweight children. How they get to that point and how to steer them differently is something that I think is the hard issue that's not always easiest to figure out.
It's great to have you on the show to talk about kids and their obesity and their health problems. But chances are, when you see them in your office, there's been a problem. Or do you have people who from little on come into your office, and of course for their shots and whatever else they need, and work with you on the child's health to keep the child healthy?
Yeah. Well, child care visits are an excellent time because the child's growth gets plotted, and I can show you at least 2 charts where between 18 and 24 months there was a large increase. That's not normal. And being in practice for 10 years or 12 years at the time, it would be easy to look at that and say it'll go away later on. But I know that it doesn't. Okay, and so when I saw this particular child who is now 11, this was 10 years ago. When I saw this weight gain, it's normal to get very steep weight gain in the first 12 months. It's not normal to see it between 18 and 24 months. And I had a talk with that mom. I said, this child is really at risk. I think this is not good. Okay, this is before any of this obesity stuff came out.
Sure.
But she really committed herself and said, I can think of some things we need to do. And she really made a lot of changes. And over time, that child, between 2 and 4, stayed very steady. Then started to slip a little bit, but I think some of this right here was normal growth. But look at what happened when she got into school and sat all day and ate the school lunch menu. Her weight started to balloon again. And then after she came in for her well checkup and we looked at the weight, talked about things again, Mom was and gave her some guidelines on how much weight she should be gaining. They got out, started walking again, and her weight was right back down to where it should be. And her body mass index in that period of time, I don't have the older ones there, but her body mass index went right back down into the normal range. And she has sustained that over time. She is now 10, and her BMI is right here. Now, that's a child that, had she continued to go up the way that initial weight showed, there's no question in my mind she would be way up here. And that mother, through walking with her and being willing to watch what that child ate, and there's so much guilt about that. There is so much guilt about telling a child you can't eat this, you can't have the ice cream, or it's just not going to work for you. But I know that this child and this mother have succeeded. And it's not an issue. They're happy with it. The child is actually very grateful that she looks good. She's grateful that she's healthy, and she doesn't feel deprived at all. So some of it is a lot of it is in the attitude and how positive you can portray it, and maintain it over time. But this child, because this is 10 years now, that it's really helped me to kind of see what works and what doesn't. This is another child that, again, between 18 and 24 months had a major increase, has done fairly well over time, but she's maintained, I think, her, when we've discussed, she's got some room to go, but if you look at her body mass index compared to her weight looks like it's going up, but her BMI, for the most part, is going more horizontal. And so I think this child is going to ultimately do very well, in part because Mom is, and we're not expecting this kid to suddenly get better. Though she was way up at 4, she's not nearly as high at 9. And so I think if that mom continues to look at how much this kid gains, she is going to look thinner over time. The mistake is when people assume that during puberty a child will thin out. Puberty is a weight gain mode. Most children fill out during puberty. They don't become thinner. So you have to actually swim against the tide and work on it to get a child to thin out during puberty. Not that it can't happen, but the majority of children fill out during puberty. So if you have a child heading into puberty that's above average already, you have to really make sure that they do go the right direction.
We just have a few minutes to wrap up, about 30 seconds. Is there anything that you would like to have here at the conclusion?
I think to read labels on foods and to watch sugar intake, to know where your child is at and where they're going over time, what is normal and what is not, and to, if your child is at risk, to try to stay the course, because by definition, if they're at risk, it's not going to suddenly evaporate. That child is going to need a lot of support and encouragement over time to make good choices, and some of those choices have to be made for them.
Thank you. Our guest today was Dr. Norma Kreilein, a pediatrician from birth to age 23. We want to thank you for being our guest today, and if you have any further questions, why not get in touch with Dr. Kreilein.